Lucius attacked his own loyalist brothers at a secret entrance which would allow the traitors to outflank the loyalists. Tragically, the loyalist hero Solomon Demeter arrived at the scene and Lucius tricked him into helping him kill his loyalist brothers, thinking they were the traitors, not Lucius. It was only when his brothers were dead that Lucius turned up and with Solomon and slew him as well. Solomon was a legend who endured so much, and seeing him die like this made my blood boil. Saul then arrives on the scene himself and sees the monster that his old friend has turned into. Lucius doesn't give a fuck and the two duel. Lucius is better and Saul is ruined. He's just a bubbly fuck that runs around without a care in the world because he can't really die, deliberately avoiding anyone that could permanently kill him. You won't see him challenge Gilliman, that's for damn sure. With Nakoni also potentially still being alive in the setting, that could be a really heavy showdown. As an extra note, fresh soon, Games Workshop has recently teased what many believe is a new Lucius model, and I would agree. You can see his tentacle hentai whip, a sword, and what looks like a very loud power pack, not to mention the pink background. To me, that's just a straight up. So hopefully we get some juicy lore about what's been up to him in that setting. Probably getting fucked up by a guardsman or falling into a ditch or some shit. Homeworld he had tried to save. Now obviously this seems like a fat L, however it was all part of the design of the monsters. By the Fallen being taken off the unit for 10,000 years or so, they could be brought back and rallied to the line at the opening of the Great Rift, the most important and dangerous time in all of 40k's history since the War in Heaven. If the line was to remain active after the heresy, he would have suffered a similar fate to his brothers eventually, either lost or killed. However, because of the Warp Rift and the Fallen scattering, the line was knocked out and could be safely kept until he was needed, which is right fucking now. Soon after this, the Great Rift would open, causing a massive demonic rock, which ended up freeing Luther, the Master of the Fallen, from his prison. Something only Azrael knew about, and he was a bit like, oh fuck. Whilst deciding what to do next and licking their wounds, the newly reborn Gilliman would become Azrael. Now in his paranoia, Azrael would think that Gilliman may have found out about the Fallen and was coming to punish the Dark Angels. Thus Azrael almost wanted Gilliman to destroyed, easily one of the most cooked things in the world. However, thankfully, he didn't doom everyone and allowed him to go. The thing is, Gilliman probably wouldn't even care about the Fallen. Every legion has skeletons in their closet. Instead, G-Man was there to give the Dark Angels Primaris reinforcements. At first, the Dark Angels wished to reject the Primaris. Who were these new Marines? They kept the chapter's secrets from them and treated them like outsiders. However, after proving themselves time and time again, the Dark Angels finally allowed them to join their inner circles, especially after Primaris Deathwing Marine called Aparion passed the chapter's greatest trials. Azrael was like, fuck it, and also underwent the Primaris upgrade surgery, becoming even deadlier and getting a fancy new model to show for it. Not a moment too soon either, as the Rock would be invaded by Vashtor, who wished to steal the Chicholcha engine for himself as it was a key element in Azrael himself fought Vashtor and amazingly landed some devastating blows in the depth of chaos. This, combined with Be'lakor arriving to gank Vashtor as a prank, caused Vashtor to leave empty-handed. Azrael,
I promise you, there are things you currently believe about this franchise, truths that you hold sacred, that have never been mentioned in a codex. Those core beliefs you have come from one of the sources that you don't consider important. Now, thankfully, I don't subscribe to this nonsensical system of declaring certain things canon and other things not. And from my perspective, if it was made by Games Workshop, the Black Library, or anyone creating something for them using their IP, with a few small exceptions like faction-specific endings to a video game, it's canon. And because I don't think like that, I can turn to White Dwarf issue 127,
so hell-bent on hunting down the traitor legions that they didn't really give a fuck if people started becoming a bunch of Bible humpers or not. One by one, the loyalist Primarchs vanished, and the Imperium was governed by mortal people as opposed to demigods, until eventually all loyalist Primarchs were gone. Now, as a normal person on Terra, you were told and given evidence of the Emperor sitting upon a golden throne, holding the Imperium together through sheer will despite literally being a corpse. You can even make a pilgrimage to close to him. Combine with the existence of an extremely well-written book, and I'd say you have a much more convincing argument for religion than most of our modern religions. Like imagine if Jesus was sitting atop the pyramids of Giza and totally shooting a massive golden laser beam into the sky. I'd be a fucking Christian for that. Hence the Imperial truth was abandoned in favour of the Imperial cult, with non-believers being branded as heretics and hunted down. There was also a repentant loyalist wordbearer Dreadnought who was in loyalist captivity. That also helped shape the form of the early Imperial cult. But how does this religion actually work? What do you have to do to participate in it? Well, like modern religions, there are numerous acceptable levels of devotion. You can be a moderate, someone who believes
as long as they built all the guns. And because the Imperium runs on an endless supply of weapons and machines, the Mechanicus became too important to rescue, no matter how insane they get. At the center of their faith is the Omnissiah. The mysterious figure they believe is the physical embodiment of the machine god, the Emperor of mankind, ever the galaxy's greatest conman, let them think he was the Omnissiah to seal the alliance. But the funny thing is, the Mechanicus has never really bought it. Deep down, most tech priests believe the real machine god is hanging out somewhere, maybe chilling in Slanesh or something, and the Emperor is just a convenient placeholder. And when your entire belief system is built around finding divine knowledge, that means one thing. If there's a piece of lost technology out there, the Mechanicus will do absolutely anything, lie, steal, or glass an entire planet to get their greasy metal, sane, theological dogma. If you want your plasma guns to work, you better play by their rules, or prepare to meet the business end of a cybernetic death cult. If you ever wondered what happens when you mix religious fanaticism for the human body, look no further than the tech priests of Mars. In the Adeptus Mechanicus, the path to power is simple. The less flesh you have, the more authority you wield. The higher you climb the cog-shaped corporate ladder, the more you replace your weak organic bits with cold, unfeeling machinery. Legs? Overrated. Try a dozen mechanical spider limbs instead. Eyes? Upgrade to a cluster of glowing red optics. Why not install a logic engine that purges those pesky emotions? If the Emperor's finest space marines, a time when the Imperium was slowly recovering from the dark days of the age of apostasy. Born in 356, M41, as the heir of planetary governor Pella of Donia, a civilized world in the Segmentum Pacificus, he quickly established himself as a formidable general in the Astra Militarum. His decisive leadership during the suppression of the Roxane Rebellion, particularly in rescuing Lord Commander Solar Phillips, caught the attention of the High Lords of Terra. Recognizing his exceptional tactical mind, Phillips took Macarius under his wing and named him his successor. It was during these formative years that Macarius also began building a network of trusted lieutenants, future commanders like Sejanus, Borgan Crassus, Tarka, Arian, Lysander of Choropoli, and Cyrus of Larentine. In 380.
Thrown around freely, but never in direct reference to pleasure in the form of sexual gratification. If you still don't believe me that Slanesh used to be way more sexual, then I'd like to present to you the very first Warhammer 40K novel ever written, Inquisitor by Ian Watson, which was later re-released under the title Dragon. This book gave us our very first look at what the city of Slanesh on the Demon Planet actually looked like. And before I get into this, I'm just going to be honest with you. I kind of thought about cutting this segment as it's almost supposed to be demonetized, but it is a piece of Warhammer's history that most people don't know about, so I think it's important to include it here. And to be fair, if I had to give any kind of credit here, I would point to the themes of Slanesh as actually being kind of representative of excellence. They're a fusion of animal, demon, and human parts into a grotesque amalgamation that still stays faithful to the design guidelines for Slanesh. But once again, this was a design that's existed since the late 80s when Slanesh was the pleasure god, and the excess that is the other chaos gods. And not just in matters of coolness, but in design, within both 40K's lore and the wider franchise. Personally speaking, I'm getting kind of tired of seeing Nurgle and Khorne represented in video games, and I want Darkseid to have demons. Do it, you cowards, make it weird. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, we're on the road to 1 million subs, so do your part in the long war and help us reach that goal. It's free, and you'll be one of the cool guys that was here before. Anyways, let me know all your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, and ideas for future videos down in the comment section below. A big thanks to everyone who supports all the work that I do, and I will catch you all in the next one. Warhammer 40k is a franchise that explores a wide array of deep and often thought-provoking themes, from the tragedy that can unfold when man becomes consumed by his own hubris, the fine line between religion and fanaticism, the perils of technological stagnation, and the list just goes on and on. However, among all of these themes, one stands apart from the rest as a concept that is woven into the very DNA of 40k itself: the grim brutality of war. At some point been unknowingly part of one of his ludicrously complex plots, as each are millennia in the making and are comprised of a labyrinthian array of overlapping schemes with infinite variables. The tiniest glimpse of his truth could drive the unprepared mind into irreparable madness. Khorne, on the other hand, throws all of that out the window. He despises liars and secret keepers, and has no taste for subtlety. Though landscape and circumstance of the battle may change, his desires are always the same. Give in to your rage and take skulls. Nothing pleases him more than the free-flowing for them. Erebus and characters like him fall into an archetype known as the hateable villain that exists solely to be hated, and he does his job incredibly well. Erebus is just evil for the sake of being evil. What are his motivations? That he's an evil piece of shit and wants to see everything burn. He's motivated by greed, a lust for power, to tear down everything that ever was and willingly act as a pawn for something that he knows is awful and will be the death of his species and potentially the end of everything. His personality is an amalgamation of every despicable character trait that exists in Game of Thrones. This is the role that Erebus plays, the villain that you don't have to feel conflicted about hating, a moral indicator of true evil in the famously morally gray grimdark future of Warhammer. What I'm saying is Erebus is the Joffrey of 40k. To further illustrate this point, Brandon gives us 5 tips to make a truly hateable villain, and Erebus fits into each and every one of these with flying colors. First and foremost, every truly hateable villain has to have their kick the dog moment, where they kill, maim, or manipulate a character that the audience has grown to love. With Joffrey, this is when he kills Ned Stark, and with Erebus, this is where he kills Argyle Tall, everybody's favorite possessed word-bearer. The job, the coward teleports away. And sure, we see him fail to corrupt Sanguinius in Fear to Tread, blaming Horus for disrupting his plans, the War Master in turn mutilating his face as punishment for his insolence. But these couple of events are not nearly enough for the audience who has had to suffer this absolute monster over the course of
open. Instead, Pedro said, "You have done your part and carried your burden. Now it's time someone carried you." Pedro then lifted up the woman and carried her the rest of the way. I reckon the Crimson Fists are actually pretty underrated, especially when they have enough wholesomeness to rival the Salamanders. To say tech priests are cold and emotionless is a bit of an understatement. The majority of them have the emotional parts of their brains removed and replaced with bits of metal and computing hardware. So when they do end up acting with emotion, it hits that much.
The prospect of everlasting peace brought me great joy. There were many things I wanted to build that did not involve the deaths of millions.
Because of this, Rogel shed his ego and any personal desires for the majority of the Great Crusade. He allowed himself to be the tool his father forged him to be. Any planet that the Imperial Fist saved, conquered, or made compliant for the Imperium was not exploited to further Rogel's own personal agenda or self-esteem. No, the only thing the Imperial Fist took from these worlds was more
All that cute fun stuff. A number of Loyalist chapters rose to face this new menace, including the Lamenters, who, true to their reputation, got absolutely sodomized, as the Mortificators chapter refused to fight alongside them due to their curse. Hence 80% of the Lamenters died before the Ultramarines arrived and saved the day. Abaddon's sorcerers were able to draw
Over 6,700 years old, yet there are no records of his birth, no details about where he came from. Unlike the Emperor, who was the direct result of Shaman's sacrifice, Malcador may have been a conscious decision, someone left in the physical realm, not to rule but to assist.
Sized USB drive to store sacred data. Plenty of volunteers, assuming you count screaming prisoners as volunteers. This mass production of human machinery isn't just practical for the Mechanicus, it's a theological duty. After all, the flesh is weak, and what better way to serve the machine god than by turning that weak flesh into blessed machinery? And if you ever wonder how far they'll go to enforce their vision, Just remember, it's a servitor slot waiting for anyone who steps out of line. Because nothing says quite like turning people into mindless cyber slaves for eternity. If there's one thing the Adeptus Mechanicus hates more than ignorance, it's innovation. In their eyes, the only thing worse than not understanding technology is daring to mess with it without the machine god's blessing. A delightful catch-all term for anyone foolish enough to think they can improve on